friends, and welcome back to Taking Up Space, the podcast where we root into our self-worth, shed what no longer serves us, and grow into the fullest versions of ourselves, one honest conversation at a time. I'm your host, Jordan, and today's episode has been blooming in my spirit for a while now because we are officially in spring, and with the new season comes a natural pull to begin again. And here's the thing about spring that I love so much is it is what January 1st is supposed to be. Basically, on January 1st, we wake up and we're like, maybe a little hungover, but we have this new idea of ourselves. We're like, we're going to start on our goals, going to crush it this year. But spring has this pull on us where, especially if you live in the Pacific Northwest, where that sunshine starts your day and you just feel like you can do anything and be anybody. And I love it. Because it's really had me thinking about one of the number one ways that you can practice self-care, which is setting boundaries. And I'm not just talking about the ones that are the firm ones that we use to protect ourselves in a crisis, but the kind that we revisit and we refresh when we're ready to evolve. Because the truth is, boundaries aren't one and done. They shift as we grow. What once felt protective might now feel restrictive. And sometimes the most loving thing that we can do is update them to reflect who we are now. I've been slowly getting back into gardening, nothing wild, just a few herbs, a tomato plant, some flowers, and some pots. But it's been enough to remind me that growth needs intention. It needs space. And sometimes it needs a little clearing out. Which brings us to today's episode theme. Boundaries in bloom. We're talking about tending to your life like a garden, checking in, pulling the weeds, and making space for what's ready to grow. Because blooming isn't just about what we add, it's about what we're willing to release. If you haven't already, though, because we have to always do this part, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. It's the best way to support this space and help these conversations continue reaching the people who need them. So, now that the housekeeping's out of the way, let's talk about my favorite thing, boundaries. Because boundaries are such a big part of how we care for ourselves, not just the ones that we set with other people, but the ones that we hold with ourselves too. They're the small everyday choices that say, this is what I need, this is what I won't carry, this is how I'm honoring my peace. But the thing about boundaries, they're not permanent. They evolve, they shift with us. And sometimes we set boundaries during a survival season when we're burnt out, heartbroken, or simply trying to keep our head above water. And in those moments, they work. They protect us. They get us through. But as we heal, as we grow, as we come back to ourselves, those same boundaries can start to feel restrictive, outdated, like an armor that we no longer need to be wearing. And that realization can bring up a lot of feelings, guilt, doubt, grief even. Because maybe that boundary once shaped how you showed up for others. Always available, always helpful, always holding space for other people and their emotions. Maybe pulling back feels like you're letting someone down, or like you're rewriting a script you didn't even realize that you'd been handed. But here's the truth. Growth isn't about staying loyal to old versions of yourselves. It's about tuning in, noticing what still feels aligned and what doesn't. Because when we avoid that check-in, when we ignore those quiet signs, our boundaries, they're going to start to blur. One part of our life is going to spill into another. Our peace gets crowded out, and we start to lose sight of the very things that we were trying to protect. Maybe it looks like feeling drained after a conversation with someone that you care about, or saying yes out of obligation, even though your whole body is saying no. Maybe it's pushing your alone time down to do the to-do list because there's always something more important, and slowly realizing that you haven't heard your own thoughts in days. These are clues. These are invitations. These are gentle nudges that something's out of sync. And it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It just means it's time to check back in with yourself. Because boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about staying connected to yourself. They're an act of self-trust. They say, I know myself well enough to notice when something no longer feels right. And I love myself enough to do something about it. This is where intentionality comes in. Taking a real pause and asking, where am I overextending myself? What part of my life feels overrun? Where do I need more breathing room? Because when we don't make space for those questions, we end up pouring from an empty cup, living reactively, saying yes when we want to say no, and slowly we disconnect from the version of ourselves that was ready to bloom. So real quick, we're going to do a quick little, so real quick, we're going to do a quick, anyways, we are going to do a visualization exercise together. Don't worry, you don't have to stop what you're doing, whether you're washing your dishes, just drinking your morning coffee, doing your laundry. Hey, Allison. But I want you to imagine your life as a garden box, a space that you've planted with care. Inside it are the people, priorities, and practices that shape your everyday life. There's your work, your relationships, your creativity, your rest. They're all growing together in the same soil. But here's the thing. Even the most intentional garden is still going to grow weeds. And sometimes those weeds start out looking harmless. They might even have served a purpose at some point. Maybe you planted a boundary during a survival season when you were burned out, overwhelmed, or just doing your best to make it through. Back then, it helped you cope. It protected you. It got you through. But now, it might be crowding out the very things that you're trying to grow. Maybe one part of your life has started to take up too much space, like work bleeding into your weekends, or a relationship that constantly pulls from your energy without giving anything back. When one area overgrows, it can start to choke out what matters most. Your rest, your creativity, your peace. That's the work of spring. Weeding out what no longer serves. This is the moment to look at your life with fresh eyes and ask, what am I holding on to that I don't actually need anymore? Imagine yourself standing over your garden box. You see new growth pushing through, your intentions, your healing, the version of you that's ready to bloom. But in between those sprouts, you notice the creeping vine of people pleasing, wrapping itself around your energy until you're depleted. The thorny weed of saying yes out of guilt, even when your whole body is saying no. That dense patch of outdated expectations, beliefs about who you should be, how much you should give, or how little space you're allowed to take up. These are the emotional weeds. They sneak in quietly, and if you don't pull them up, they're gonna keep growing. And just like in any garden, some things don't just need to be cleared, they need more care, more attention, more room to stretch towards the light. So real quick, take a breath, pause, and ask yourself, what boundaries did I set when I was surviving that I no longer need now that I'm healing? Where have I been overgiving or overcompensating? What am I doing out of obligation instead of desire? And most importantly, what do I want to make space for instead? Letting go of these emotional weeds isn't always easy. It can feel messy. It can bring up guilt, but it's not failure. It's growth. It's you saying, I don't need this to protect me anymore. I'm safe enough now to choose differently. You don't have to keep feeding what's been slowly depleting you. You're allowed to clear the space. You're allowed to choose something new. And when you finally clear those tangled roots, the people pleasing, the guilt, the outdated beliefs, what's left behind is room to breathe and room to finally bloom. And this is the part that can feel the hardest, the pruning, as one would say. When we think about blooming, when we see a beautiful garden, we see the beautiful outcome. We see the vibrant petals, the full expression of growth, and how much time and energy was put into it is forgotten. Those blooming, beautiful gardens that you're seeing, they took a lot of pruning. They took a lot of removing, reshaping, and clearing out what was overgrown. Pruning is meant to be intentional. You're not cutting for the sake of cutting. You're creating space for something to thrive. And just like in a garden, pruning doesn't always look dramatic. It's not always a full uprooting or a cut them off and never speak to them moment. Sometimes it's subtle, gentle. Sometimes it looks like reclaiming your time and no longer being constantly available. saying not right now instead of yes, of course, redefining the terms of a relationship so it aligns with your values and your peace. It can also look like scaling back your energy in spaces that once felt nourishing, but now they just feel draining. Pruning is about shaping your life, not out of fear, but out of love. And here's the piece that's often misunderstood. Soft boundaries are still boundaries. You can be gentle and still be clear. You can be kind and still be firm. You can love someone and still say, this no longer works for me. Being soft doesn't make you weak. It means you're honoring your heart while still protecting your peace. That is strength. That is self-respect. That is blooming with intention. So if you're afraid that shifting a boundary makes you flaky or feel guilty for pulling back from something that no longer serves or fits, I want to lovingly remind you, this is the work of growth. You are not the same person you were when you first planted those boundaries, and you're allowed to adjust them to meet the version of you that's blooming now. There's wisdom in knowing when to gently let go. There's power in pruning, because every time that you release what's overgrown, you're giving something else the space to stretch towards the sun. There are times, though, when pruning isn't enough, when a full cut is necessary. I recently went through this with someone I had considered a friend. I had allowed them space in my life for support, for closeness, for trust. But over time, I began to realize that their full support, if we want to call it that, was actually being weaponized. It wasn't nurturing. It wasn't reciprocal. It was a way to stay tethered to me without truly showing up in a way that felt safe or caring. And their story is going to be different because we are two different individuals. And the thing is I had to make the hard decision to remove that plant, that person entirely from my garden. It's not easy. Cutting someone off can come with grief, with doubt, with second guessing, but every day that they are no longer crowding your space, no longer overshadowing your growth, you reclaim something sacred. You create room for light to reach parts of you that were being stifled, and you allow yourself to breathe again. Sometimes the most loving thing that you can do for yourself and even for the other person is to stop trying to force something to grow where the soil has long since dried up. And that's okay. Because not everything, not everyone is meant to stay in your life forever. Some things are seasonal, some things are meant to teach you, and some things are not meant to carry you forward. And when you release what no longer belongs, you make space for the relationships, the opportunities, and the healing that do. And as you make the hard decisions, whether that's cutting someone off or shifting a long-standing boundary, I want you to remember to offer yourself grace. This part of your process can stir up a lot of emotions. You might feel grief, sadness, or anger. You might feel relief, joy, or even confidence. And honestly, you're probably going to feel it all at once. That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means you're moving through something real. That's why it's so important to create small practices and rituals that help support you during this time. This might look like journaling through the emotions as they come up, taking intentional rest, having honest check-ins with trusted friends or mentors. And if you find yourself missing someone you've set a boundary with, that's okay. There was a version of you that needed them, that relied on their presence. That doesn't mean they're able to meet your needs now, or that they still belong in your life in the same way. Growth takes time. Healing takes time. So go easy on yourself. Tune into your needs in real time. Don't wait until you get home. Don't wait until you have a free moment. No, if you're feeling the feelings, grief, joy, sadness, anger, whatever it might be, disappointment, check in with yourself right then in that moment. Give yourself 1 minute to step back and ask yourself, do I feel more at peace with the boundary in place? Am I holding this boundary out of fear or out of self-respect? What do I need more of right now? Connection, quiet, clarity. You can do this all within a minute with yourself, or you can let it take up 20 to 30 minutes. It's up to you. And the key thing to remember, if you make a decision that doesn't feel quite right later on, that doesn't mean you failed. It just means You learned something. You gathered information that will guide you in the future. This is all part of growing into the version of yourself that you're becoming. And you're allowed to take your time. So stop being mean to yourself, okay? There's no reason to ever beat yourself up over a bad decision or beat yourself up over the wrong decision. Because no matter what happens, you're still going to learn from it. You're still going to grow, and you're still going to have the opportunity in the future to make a different decision. So here's what I want you to take away from today's episode. Boundaries are not about being cold or distant. They're about being clear. They are a reflection of how deeply you respect yourself, your time, your energy, and your peace. And the truth is, as you grow, your boundaries will grow with you. Some will need gentle resets, and some will need to be completely redefined. And some may even require a hard, painful goodbye. But every shift that you make, it's an act of self-trust. Every boundary you honor is a declaration that you matter. You are not too much for wanting to feel safe. You are not selfish for needing space. You are not wrong for deciding that something or someone no longer aligns with where you're headed. So as you move through this season, I hope you choose yourself with intention and with love. I hope you listen to your gut even when it's uncomfortable. And I hope you remember above all else, it's not your job to shrink to make others feel more comfortable. It's your job to create a life that feels good to you to live in. You deserve joy. You deserve peace. You deserve space to grow. And finally, if this episode resonated with you, I'd love if you were to share it with somebody who might need it. And don't forget, as always, to subscribe, leave a review, or tag me on Instagram with your takeaways. It's the best way to support this space and help it reach more people who are ready to take up space in their own lives. And next week, we will be continuing the spring energy with an episode I'm calling Spring Cleaning for the Soul. I think that's what I'm calling it. But we're going to take emotional clutter, the habits, the thought patterns, and even relationships that are quietly taking up space in your spirit. It's time to clear out what's heavy and make room for what actually feels good. So grab your journal, grab your favorite drink, and get ready for a reset that you can feel. Until next time, keep choosing you, keep honoring what you need, and don't be afraid to bloom in your own way, in your own time. You've got this. Kisses.